Hey guys, welcome to the Late Late Show. I'm your host Matt from Lakers UK. Here joining me as usual, I've got Jonathan Kiernan. How are you doing, mate?
All good. Still on a bit of a high from the Lakers championship. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, all good. Have you got the Man United PSG game on in the background?
I don't want to. I don't want to be disappointed or sad. So I'm not going to the game on now.
Yep, you're a United fan. I'm in Paris at the moment, so I'm rooting for PSG. So I've got it.
Of course you are.
Got it on in the background. And then we heard a little bit of a chuckle then, and we've got a special guest with us all. It's in the form of Harrison Faigen from Silver Screen and Roll. How are you doing, Harrison? Thank you so much for joining us again.
No, I'm happy to do it, guys. And I'm always happy to get an invite onto the most pleasant sounding podcast in I think the entire Lakers sphere. Like you got your accents. I'm just saying, it's nice. It's very soothing. I'm sure that for you two it just sounds normal or whatever. I have the accent, but for me it's it's like going on a fancy BBC show or something, or I'm doing Downton Abbey Lakers podcast. I appreciate it's very nice for the ears, and I'm doing great. I think the only thing that makes me sad is that they're now they're week and a half old babies that haven't watched the Lakers win a championship, and that's just really sad to me that they've gone through this type of the Lakers are gonna have to win it again next year because these poor deprived children now that have gone before it was there were 10-year-old kids that hadn't seen their favorite team win a title, and now it's it just that was so much fun that it makes me sad for the week and a half year olds that haven't gotten to.
They'll jump on the bandwagon eventually.
Yeah.
Well, that was an unexpected intro. Very entertaining, wasn't that? Right. Coming off the topic of the 1.5-week-old babies, and let's come on the topic of how were you with the championship win? How did you celebrate? Did you do much celebrating, or was it just work ever since?
Yeah, so it was mostly work. I did get to celebrate a little bit, I went on Locked On Lakers with Anthony and Pete, which getting to talk to those guys, they're two of my best friends in the entire industry, and just in real life, they're going to be groomsmen in my well, they were going to be groomsmen in my wedding before the pandemic, and now they will be groomsmen in my renewal, celebration thing that whatever we have when we're allowed to all see people again. So that was fun getting to talk with them and just just shit talk about the season and all that stuff. And my wife and I celebrated a little bit, but to be honest, I haven't had a ton of time off since the title because, as you can expect, covering a title winning team, there's a lot of wrap up stuff to do. And, so it has been a lot of work, but it's also been it's never more fun work than it is right now. This is a lot more fun than doing exit interviews about a team that went had 20 wins that year. And it's oh, well, Tyson Chandler wants to come back, or, whatever it may be. This is fun work. So I'm happy and I'm honored that I get to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been a tiring one for us over here because everyone was going on about it being a heavy load for the players in the bubble, but getting up at 3-4 a.m. every single morning throughout an entire playoff run right up until a championship win really did take its toll. I think I'm still actually a little bit tired now. It's been really hard to get back on top of the sleep.
Yeah, the commitment that you guys have, I can't even imagine. I get paid to do this, and I would not wake up at 3 a.m. to watch Laker games. And so I just have so much respect for you guys being able to stay fans of the team and watch games live and stuff like that. With the time difference, that's crazy.
No, yeah. It's absolutely mad. It's just, well, it's worth it. At the end of the day, it would have really sucked if we didn't win the title this season. But at the end of the day, it's definitely proven to be worth it this season. Just to ask you a quick question there. It's you've been covering the Lakers since the 2012, 2013 offseason, isn't it?
2013, the day Dwight Howard left was my first day, and I wasn't even writing at that point. I was doing newsletter roundup stuff, and I remember I was very nervous about it. I found out the night before there was all the talk of the plane tracking and all that stuff and where he was going and that he was going to leave. And I woke up in the morning and it was completely official. He was gone, and so I was just rounding up. I was basically as a you gotta imagine, as a diehard Lakers fan, I would then had to go to every single website in the NBA universe and find their stories on Dwight Howard leaving, read them, plug them in news links and whatever. It was the most painful experience probably of like my Laker fan life of just like, oh, like not only did this team disappoint, they got swept. Now I got to go read every single story on it because I signed up for this for Lord knows what reason. I was definitely questioning my life choices at that point.
Jesus, it sounds like a trial by fire.
Yeah, no, it definitely was for sure. Like it was like, okay, no, I can't put profanity in the headline. Like, okay.
That's mental. But just compared to like this when you started kind of covering the Lakers till now, obviously like winning the championship now for the first time since you started covering the Lakers. What are some massive changes that you've noticed within kind of not even just Laker reporting, but just the Lakers organization in general? Obviously, there's been a lot of turnover in terms of coaching and players, but what have you noticed yourself that's kind of been like a change in the organization or changed the kind of way writing the Lakers has been approached?
Well, you know, I think I think one of the things organizationally that has changed a lot that like we were all kind of like joking about before we came on air was like obviously the front office has had a significant amount of change over in some ways, like at least at the top of it, right? Because they still have a lot of these scouts that have been doing it for years, and that's why like, you know, throughout the cup check bus, like to, you know, the Magic Pelinka and now just Pelinka era, or I guess Pelinka Rambis, if we want to say, like there's been a lot of consistency in terms of finding, you know, like players and stuff, but at the top of the front office and how the team is run and the final decisions made, we've seen a lot of turnover. We went from, you know, Jim Buss and like Chaz the bartender and Mitch Kupchak like to you know, like Magic and Pelinka, and like so there was like you went from Kupchak who like and like there that and the Buss regime who like to I think those two's detriment never leaked anything, and I think it led to like unfavorable coverage towards like their regime. And, you know, like I think media personalities didn't necessarily feel like they knew as much what the Lakers were doing. One of the things that Pelinka and Johnson did very well when they took over, and that Jeannie Buss has always done really well, was, and I'm not talking, when I say the media, I'm not talking about myself. I do not, believe it or not, have Magic Johnson's phone number and like get to talk to him on a regular basis. But like, you know, they get to talk, they talk to your Wojs, to your Shams Karanias, to your ESPN. Like you can see it in the tone and tenor of the leaks, the way the coverage has changed, all of that stuff, and get their story and their angles out there. So even while like, again, like Lakers fans would say, the coverage of this team has not always been favorable. And I agree, it has been more favorable since like these personalities that kind of know how to work the media a little bit have taken over. And like, you know, that was a big change. And then when Magic was at the top, it was interesting. You saw minute by minute leaks basically of every single thing that the Lakers were planning to do, you know, most memorably at the Anthony Davis trade deadline of like, oh yeah, like source close to the Lakers says they're offering the whole roster and like an ownership stake and like the deed to Staples Center and like you know, Kareem statue and everything for AD that wasn't tied down basically and wasn't named LeBron James. To now we're seeing like the Pelinka era where the leaks are a lot more strategic and like planned out, and like what we hear about is stuff that either makes the Lakers look favorable or would have come out in a press release anyway 95% of the time. And so like I think that we've seen, you know, changes over in that way. And so like that's in how the organization is run, that goes through the front office regimes. And I think it also kind of covers the way that the media climate has changed. And I also think like some of this is like, I mean, obviously there was Lakers Twitter, there was a Lakers blogosphere before I ever joined, but I think, I don't know if I'm noticing it more because I'm a part of it, but I also do think that genuinely the rise of technology, the like access to stuff like this, like people couldn't do StreamYard or things like this in 2013, or certainly not as easily. And I think that that's allowed for a really smart like fan base and blogosphere to kind of pop up around this team. And like I think that we have better coverage of the Lakers from almost every angle than we've ever had before. Like we have a huge core of traditional journalists and traditional media covering the team, giving us news. Everything is covered in depth. And then we have like, you know, fans like yourselves, like fans like at Silver Screen Roll, the site that I run. You know, we have Darius Soriano, who's been around through all of that longer than I have, but we have people like Laker Film Room, like jumping in and breaking it down from an X's and O's perspective. We have like Ben Rosales and, you know, like other people breaking it down from cap perspective. And like, I think that there is more knowledge collectively in this like blogosphere, Lakers Twitter, Lakers Reddit, you know, Lakers, whatever you want to call it, all the different sites. There's just more knowledge, I think, and like the amount and quality of the discourse has dramatically improved. And, you know, got regressed in some ways, but like mostly improved, I think, over the course of this. And it's like one of the few areas I think in the entire planet that more internet and social media has made the world a better place than a worse one.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you were going on about the technology there. What was it like in terms of you covering the team in the bubble? Then did you have access to like the press conferences and things like that on Zoom? What was that like then?
So it was funny to even like, we're talking about evolution of technology and like people learning how to use it and stuff like that. It's funny to go back to like even just last summer. So like before the bubble, like last summer, you know, just for convenience sake, like obviously there was no pandemic then, like there was no whatever, like I mean summer 2019, like when a lot of players like were brought in, like they just did like a conference call for their first press conference or whatever, and like they would do a couple of them a day. Like I think there was one day where it was Quinn Cook and Danny Green and maybe DeMarcus Cousins, if I'm remembering correctly. So they would go through them and like just for convenience sake, like not ask us all to come down to the facility, just like get us on a conference call. Everybody basically gets to ask one question, like that kind of thing. And so they would like call on you and do that, but like you didn't get to see the players. Like it was just on speakerphone. Like there were a million people forgetting to mute their mics when they weren't on, so you'd hear people parenting their kids, or like there was a radio station. I genuinely, I would say who it was if I knew. I genuinely don't know which one it was, that was somehow accidentally looping in the ads that they were playing at the time to the conference call. So like to the point where it's like blasting like an ad for like a local auto shop or something through the speakerphone, like destroying my recording, my eardrums. Like the player is like, what is going on? Like the PR person is like frantically like trying to mute it. And so we've gone from that to, which like, you know, was somewhat of a mess, but also like it was convenient in some ways, but like obviously that was not something that they had devoted their expertise to. And then you go to the pandemic, and like it started out, it was conference calls, and then it went to like a traditional like setup Zoom or whatever, where it was like you could kind of see everyone, and it was very weird. Like you were like all looking at everybody in their like disheveled early pandemic days states, and we were all kind of like gentlemen's agreement to not screenshot each other and like our you know, all that stuff. To by the time they got to the bubble, like the NBA had figured out Zoom and like streaming technology and all of that stuff, where like it was, you know, you use the raise hand feature, they'd unmute you still wouldn't be on screen, but you'd get to ask questions. And it was just generally done in a way that, like, you know, there were your hiccups here and there, like there's always going to be with technology. Melissa Rowland of Sports Illustrated's dog, I don't know if you guys saw this, just started barking, like went off during one of Anthony Davis's questions. It was hilarious. But we had my cat tried to have his own moment like that, but thankfully I was on mute at the time. And like, I guess he just had pressing thoughts on how Danny Green had played that night or something like that. Just had a question he wanted to ask. But like overall, the technology of it got way better. And yeah, so that was a very long-winded answer, but like, yes, like I was on Zoom with the players during the bubble, and we were able to have access to them, to Frank, whatever. Like, you know, obviously as the playoffs went on, it was harder to get questions in. There were more important media members than I was covering the team at that point. But like, it was very helpful in terms of like, because sometimes, you know, if you just watch on Twitter, you just see the quote that comes out. You don't necessarily hear the question that was asked. And sometimes that's important for context or contextualizing what they're actually responding to. Was that actually a shot at someone, you know, whatever it may be. So like, that was incredibly helpful and something that I couldn't have imagined being able to do, like much less attend games or anything like that, like I was able to pre-pandemic, or attend practices and actually like sit down sometimes with these guys and talk one-on-one and whatever. That was something I never could have imagined in 2013. And then, you know, I'm just grateful that technology allowed us to continue to kind of have some of that access to kind of inform our takes and our stories and things like that as the bubble went on. But it was very different than obviously being in the bubble.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, and one thing me and Matt actually talking about there, just about the bubble, was like this. We were seeing the Lakers of probably the best they've been in obviously like close to a decade or over a decade. This is the best team we've seen from the Lakers. But we've also kind of spoke about like we remember the dark days of when was the like some of the worst teams, some of the worst Lakers teams we've seen. I was trying to think of like a really bad memory, but it's to be honest, it's not a bad memory. It's you look back on it and it's funny. But remembering when Chris Kaman was kind of lying across the bench.
No, that's a great memory in retrospect. Like it was, in retrospect.
But it was just watching it. It was just like he was hitting a 7-footer covering every season. I was like, yeah, this is my bed for the night, basically. But yeah, What was when, as long as you've been covering, what's been one of the kind of the darker, like obviously it's the highs and lows, but what would you say has been one of the lows you've experienced as a Laker fan during the last kind of decade?
Was it Ronnie Price?
Was it when what?
Was it Ronnie Price?
Ronnie Price was definitely an experience, and like definitely, like honestly, look, like Byron Scott was like always incredibly kind to me, but like he was not a good coach, and so like being someone who was still trying to find like the balance between being a fan, being a journalist, all that stuff, like that was kind of a hard era to cover because it's like, look, like I appreciated him. Like there were times where like I did not get a question, and he would stop and like talk to me afterwards, like briefly, which like as you know, a brand new journalist is like that does not generally happen, and like I always like I think he is a very kind person. I did not think that he was a very good coach, and I also don't think that he was set up for success. So like that was like a difficult era from the perspective of like how hard do I want to go on him? How hard is fair? Because like obviously this roster is not good. So like what are we really criticizing him for? But there were also moments like 3-pointers don't win championships, playing Ronnie Price constantly over Jordan Clarkson in a lost season, like even when Kobe's injured, and like literally there is zero reason to try and win and like only, or at least only focus on that. So like that was, I remember my first game recap was during the last D'Antoni year. And it was Jody Meeks going off for like 50 against the Thunder, which is also like, yes, it's a high because like that was everybody who watched that game remembers the Jody Meeks game. Like that was unbelievable. Like, you know, two of the best scorers in the NBA, Jody Meeks and Kevin Durant going head to head, you know, Lakers Thunder, just like the broadcasters thought. But like, that's also like in retrospect, that is an incredibly dark memory that the Lakers needed Jody Meeks to go for 55 to stay in a game at one point. Like that is a testament to how bad that team was. And like, so that is like kind of a dark, but also funny memory along the same lines of the Chris Kaman thing. You know, like I just like, I remember the Robert Sacre days and like, you know, when his bench dancing was the highlight of games, basically like was Robert Sacre celebrating on the sidelines is like the best part of a game. That's sad in retrospect, but it was fun during those times. And, you know, like who can forget Ryan Kelly starting at small forward, another Byron Scott special that I am, you know, it's funny, like Sabrina Merchant, who writes for our site in our Slack, is genuinely convinced that Ryan Kelly would have been an NBA player had his career not been ruined by like how badly his confidence was destroyed by having to try and guard small forwards when he was clearly... That dude was 6'11". Like he was not this is not Kevin Durant or Dirk that we're talking about here. Like he did not have any lateral quickness whatsoever, and genuinely, like I think torpedoed his NBA career, you know, through that. So I guess those are some of the memories that come to mind from some of the dark days.
Yeah, and as we flip back to this present team who have just won a championship, and there's very bright days, well, at the moment and hopefully ahead. Obviously, all eyes are on LeBron James, on Anthony Davis. But in terms of your opinion, on the last episode, we spoke about this topic. So I thought it'd be great to bring it up to you as well. Who would you rank as your top 3 supporting cast members from the 2020 Lakers through the playoffs?
Yeah, you know, I think like Jared Dudley's coaching from the bench. Clear, I'm just messing with you, but can you imagine if I'd come on here? I was like Jared Dudley, Quinn Cook, and you know, like Devontae Kaycock. Like, look, like I like all those guys, but like not. I think for me, it's it would definitely be Caruso is definitely one of them. Like, look, like we saw it. Like, I don't think that he was the Lakers' 3rd best player throughout the playoffs, but I do think that he was incredibly valuable in terms of like being able to play his role to a T, be able to make an impact, even though he wasn't like, you know, an offensive force, he still was able to do enough to remain playable for his like exemplary defense on the other end. Like, yeah, I'm not going to say he was the best defender on the team, but he was probably the best, like ball handling defender besides Anthony Davis, and like maybe like the minutes where LeBron really locked in. Like he, you know, he was incredible on that end. So Caruso, I'm gonna go Rondo. Like as much as you know, when we last talked and we did that podcast, we never would have guessed that Rondo would have jumped in here, but he was incredible for the Lakers during the playoffs. Like when he played for the most part, and it's like the thing that I came to was, playoff Rondo does not always show up, but when playoff Rondo shows up, like that is an all-star caliber player. Like he's not there every game, but when he's there, like that is a force of nature.
Yeah.
And just the way that, you know, he shot so much more confidently, he pushed the pace, he gave the Lakers the other, but like everything that Frank Vogel sounded like he was delusional for saying that Rondo gave them during the regular season, Rondo actually gave them in the playoffs. And so like credit to both of them for remaining focused. And then like it has to be KCP. Like I think Dwight Howard is another nominee here, but KCP was probably the third best Laker for over, if you're looking on aggregate over the course of the playoffs, just in terms of impact, in terms of consistency from the first round to the finals, like KCP, it's kind of incredible that there were questions about his playoff ability and whatever going into this season, but he was like he was their most reliable, I think, third player for over the course of the playoffs. And like just the floor spacing he gave them, the 3-point shooting, his defensive metrics don't really reflect this, but I really thought that him kind of taking on the challenge and chasing guys around full court and all of that stuff was a huge, in a similar way to Avery Bradley was, where like the numbers didn't really reflect it, but you could tell they were playing better defense when he was out there, and he kind of gave them an enthusiasm and energy boost. And I think KCP at some point really seemed to take on the challenge of like, okay, I'm not Avery Bradley, but I'm going to really like hustle and like focus and, you know, pick up guys full court and like try and like amp guys up on defense. And I thought that he was, you know, for that, his shooting, how quickly and reliable he was when running out on the break, all of that stuff, like those would be my three guys.
Yeah, I think one which because in my list I had KCP, Rondo, and then that third I was kind of like torn between. Obviously, you mentioned Caruso, you mentioned Dwight. I also had Markieff Morris in there. I thought his versatility.
Yeah, no, it's a testament to how good all of those guys actually were, despite all the questions. That like there are so many guys you could add in here. Like even Kuzma doesn't deserve to be in the top three, but even he found ways to make impacts despite like a ton of criticism. Danny Green playing through apparently an Achilles injury that he mentioned on his podcast, like and still finding a way to make an impact and also save the Lakers from having to play J.R. Smith or Dion Waiters. Like, you know, all those guys made an impact.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what would you want to add anything in about supporting cast members, Jonathan?
Taylor Tucker. I actually generally thought THD in the
game, yeah.
He looked like
the greatest heat check of all time was Frank Vogel playing Talen Horton-Tucker for 10 minutes in a game that like actually mattered and was somewhat in the balance, and having that work out. Like that was JR. I don't know if like he was just like he caught like whatever J.R. Smith has for a minute and like just you know activated like, all right, I'm just gonna take one. That was the pull-up 45-footer of coaching moves basically, and it worked.
Yeah, I'd say he probably looked at JR and was like, oh, he looks a bit glassy-eyed tonight. I think I'm gonna throw in THD. But yeah. That's the one thing I think we were in the group chat talking about this like during the game, and everyone was just like 45 messages all at once, like Taylor Tucker. And then just and I was just like, this doesn't make sense. And then we're all excited and we're all really nervous at the same time. I was like, oh, this is actually a really important game. But yeah, my God, like that's the like everyone initially was kind of saying like he was a talent, he is a talent. But I was like, oh, another clutch guy coming to the Lakers, just Rich Paul kind of looking after one of his own. But no, that is like what he showed against the Rockets. That is definitely not the case. He is a legit talent, and I think Matt and I kind of agree that we think he has definitely has the ability to be like a fairly prominent role player next season. Maybe not like definitely. I wouldn't say starter caliber, but I think he has the potential to be like a prominent role player.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think like I am not quite there with like every game just because he's so young. Like he's only going to turn 20 during next season, or turn 9. He's what? He's 19 now, right? Yeah, he's 19. I just looked this up last night. He's going to turn 20 during next season. And like, you know, I think that is a little young where like it's to the point where I was saying this on our podcast last night. Like if he's playing a lot, something has either gone very well or very horribly. And like with no in between, like there's no like middle scenario where Talen Horton-Tucker is playing a regular role. He either is like came into training camp and just killed it, or like multiple guys have suffered season-ending injuries or something like that. Like if he is a regular rotation player with no in between. But like that said, I do think that he could easily replace like the regular season Quinn Cook, like fifth guard role type thing, where he doesn't play every game, but every 3 games, give him a change of pace, like, just to keep guys fresh, keep guys engaged, whatever. Frank throws him in there for 10, 12 minutes. Like I could definitely see that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to move on in one moment. Just going to quickly bring up some comments here. We've got Late Show Scoop. Usually when KCP makes his first 3 is a good indication. He made many of them. And also, obviously, Late Show Scoop is advocating Kenny, as he always does. Surprised there isn't a Jared Dudley, hint in there as well. And then we've got, I think, on-court contributions were huge, but how about the glue guys like Dion and Cook from John? And then he also added on a tremendous presence in the locker room, those guys were, which I think is a good shout. I think a lot of people kind of put players like Jared Dudley under, and obviously we do like a bit of a joke about him, but I think like they are vital players, aren't they? Kind of like they said, the glue that keeps them together, the veteran presence, kind of the eyes on the sidelines, really.
No, like, this is why, not to take it in a completely different direction, but this is why the whole, like, Lakers fans, like, let's petition to not get Kyle Kuzma or not get Danny Green a ring. Like, it doesn't matter if you play or not. Like, if your team wins a title, you know what I mean? Like, everybody contributed, whether they played or not. Like, Quinn Cook is maybe the most well-liked guy in the entire NBA. Like, everyone is his best friend. And, like, everyone's, like, the fact that LeBron, like, I'm writing about him for our like season in review series later this week. And I was going back and looking up like how Quinn Cook ended up on the team. LeBron argued to Pelinka to sign him. Anthony Davis recruited him to join the Lakers. Like that's maybe 2 of the biggest stars in the NBA wanted that guy on their team. And I know that he didn't play well a lot, but like, he didn't play super well by his standards. Like, when he was in, he barely played during the playoffs. I think 24 minutes total. And I don't really think any of them came outside of garbage time, but he was a guy that, when you're in a bubble for like this long, like say nothing about a normal playoffs, like especially this scenario, you need chemistry. And we saw that, like Jared Dudley called out the Clippers, like they didn't want to be there. And he's right. Like they didn't seem genuinely like they wanted to be there. And like, there are all kinds of reasons for that. But I think that the Lakers chemistry, having a guy like Quinn Cook, who's organizing a Madden tournament to keep everybody engaged and getting everybody like to go and hang out with each other, like during these nights, like LeBron, like obviously LeBron made huge on-court contributions, but LeBron setting up wine nights for guys after victories and stuff. Jared Dudley being a guy who could, sit down and have breakfast and like go work out with LeBron, but then also like take a guy like THT under his wing, take a guy like Kyle Kuzma, really try and boost up his confidence and stuff like that. Be a huge cheerleader from the bench. I forget who it was. Danny Green who was saying the other day that Jared made a huge impact just in terms of helping them come up with adjustments, like almost like an extra assistant coach type of thing. And he was basically like an honorary Lakers spokesperson this year in terms of how many interviews he did, getting the word out about like this team and pushing narratives and stuff like that. Jared made an impact. Like all of these guys, like even Dion, just like in terms of getting guys engaged and keeping guys like they all just really liked each other. And I think when you're away from your families for 1.5 months, away from most of the world for 3 months, like you need guys like that, keeping everyone engaged and keeping like everyone a part of the team. And I think like, especially this year, more so than almost any other, every single guy deserves credit for the Lakers being able to do this, whether, it's chemistry, whether it's Quinn Cook pretending to be Damian Lillard for the scout team in the first round and all that stuff. And, Frank said that he did a good impression. I don't like, and like, look, I can see it. Like Quinn Cook is like an extremely broke person's Damian Lillard, can pull up from anywhere, kind of dribble a little bit. He's not going to have the same success, but like all of those guys, whether they were scout team, chemistry, whatever, they all made an impact.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what we're going to quickly do is going to quickly get a few ads in very quick before we move on. As people know that have listened to this before, but if you don't, support for the Late Show is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched in the United Kingdom, and you can be one of the first men over here to experience their life-changing products. Personally, when it comes to grooming products, I usually bounce around quite a lot, find it quite difficult to find the right product for me that I can stick with long term. But the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0 is perfect for the job. You don't really need to go anywhere else. You don't really need anything else. I've obviously got one myself right here. Very good piece of kit. It's a third generation trimmer.
Just keep the camera up there. I'm just saying, don't move. I don't want to see your camera start to move now that I realize you have the groomer in the shot.
It's a third generation trimmer that features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents, which is obviously very important. 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. The battery lasts up to 90 minutes. It's waterproof. You can use it in the shower. It's even got an LED light so you can see where you're going. It is a top quality product. You don't really need to go anywhere else. Here on the Late Late Show, we can offer you a unique promo code. You can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code LakersUK20 at manscaped.com. That's the code LakersUK20 at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping over at manscaped.com. And here's the best part. We all watched the Danny Green Manscaped ad. We've kind of come up with our little slogan as well. Don't let your balls waste away in free agency. Secure that max contract now with Manscaped. You won't regret it.
That was the greatest live read I have ever been a part of. I just got to say, and the Danny Green thing, that was one of my favorite pandemic hiatus blogs that we got to write. Was arguably the funniest headline I have ever written was Danny Green wants you to shave your balls. I found the perfect yes, yeah, no, look, Danny really went all out on the Manscaped ads, and him and JaVale McGee really brought it and hammed it up, and I respected the product advertising team over there. They do a great job of really getting people to lean in and have some fun with it.
Yeah, definitely. And also as well, everyone is trying to get a hold of their champions merch, as we all have recently. Well, you can get a discount over at NBA Store EU. Go over to www.lakersuk.com/partners. Select the relevant link. It'll direct you to the store where you can use the promo code LakersUK10 for 10% off your order. It can be used on already discounted items too around the store. So be sure to take advantage of that. Did actually get an email today saying my Champions cap has actually been shipped. So I am frantically checking the post pretty much every hour when I really don't need to be, because it wasn't going to come here today. But still, I'm really excited over a cap. Anyone else got anything? Harrison, did you get any Champions merch? Is that
I did actually. I got I'm a bobblehead collector, so I actually got the Anthony Davis championship bobblehead, the match. I already have a LeBron one that someone sent me a while ago. I also got, what else did I get? I got the cartoon shirt that a lot of them were wearing for my brother for his birthday, because he was really excited about the title. His birthday's coming up next week, so I wanted to make sure that I grabbed him something. And I got a couple shirts for my in-laws.
Yeah, that's cool. As we move on to the final segment of the podcast, we brought in a few questions from some of our Patreon members that we got out of the group chat. So we've got 3 questions, then obviously it'll spark a little bit of conversation most likely, but I'll let Jonathan start off with the first one. Okay.
So the first one's from Ben. Shout out, Ben. Avery Bradley didn't feature much in the bubble. Well, didn't feature all in the bubble, and has a player option for next season. So, what do we think? Do we think Avery's going to play a big part next season?
I would be shocked if he didn't take that player option. Again, this is not reporting or anything, but just logically, this is going to be a fairly dry market. He hasn't played in months. He didn't participate in the bubble. I just can't see, maybe he thinks that he can get, it's just more valuable to him to lock in a longer term deal than the 1-year contract that he'd essentially be on if he opted in. And he wants to do that. But I just can't see it. I think that honestly, I think it would be more likely that the Lakers extended him than that he went into free agency. Pelinka is his former agent. I don't know, obviously, actually, I don't know the salary cap feasibility of that. I just can't see a world where he opts out, is basically my point. I don't know if you guys feel differently, but I don't think that he played, he obviously played well and was a part of their success. I don't think that he played so well pre-bubble that he would opt into a dry market unless like his agent now is hearing something about like, you know, I don't know, like the Hawks or something really want Avery Bradley for their culture or something like that. Like, you know, beyond something like that, I just can't see it. I think he's going to be back.
Yeah, I think if anything, it'll probably favor the Lakers in the fact that what's he on, like 6 million? Is he next season?
I think it's 4. I want to say.
Okay,
yeah.
And then
I'll be in the middle.
Because obviously he wasn't in the bubble, I think kind of he could get forgotten about a little bit. So he opts in on like what 4 or 5 million or whatever it is.
I'm looking this up right now because I don't want to be. He's 5.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a steal, really. You know, the Lakers get back, you know, a really intense perimeter defender for 5 million. That will kind of be like a new signing, really, because we didn't have him at all in the bubble.
Yeah, I honestly don't know that like for 5 million that you're going to do better than that this summer this offseason. Force of habit. We're not in the summer anymore. This offseason on the free agent market than a 1-year $5 million deal for a guy that actually did contribute and was a starter for most of the year. Like I think that like look, like I'm not the biggest Avery Bradley fan. I actually thought they would do fine without him, and you know they proved me more right than I ever could have imagined. But like I do think that he was a valued like asset and guy to at least throw at certain matchups or whatever. Like I think that like they should definitely they should hope that he just takes that option, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree, definitely. But there's one thing I was really hoping from Avery Bradley this season. Obviously, he brought the defense and like he was able to kind of be pretty good from the 3-point line as well. But I would have loved for him when he got into the starting role, if he became more of a secondary playmaker, which he just didn't. He was moving the ball around and basically getting it to LeBron, which obviously is the move he should be doing. But I was hoping that he could be more of a secondary playmaker, which he just wasn't. But he knows his role. He plays his role like very well. And yeah, I think I tend to agree with both of you guys. I'd say he definitely takes his player option. Probably kind of hopes to go into next season to try and prove even more and probably land himself a long-term deal. But yeah, completely agree.
I think to his credit that I agree with most of what you just said. I think to his credit though, like they did miss him just being a guy that could take mid-range shots, at least early on. Like he did give them a little bit of a different dynamic offensively and is actually like really good at that pull-up jumper, like, you know, as NBA players go and near the free throw line. And so like, I think that he did add more value than I expected in that specific aspect. Although I do think that his defense is a little overrated at times, but like, I also think that there's an intangible quality to the energy that he amps the team up with how hard he plays.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on to the second question, which is from Massimo, again, Patreon member, very active with his questions. And he has jumped into a bit of a trade scenario, which is obviously an entertaining one at the moment. We've all seen a lot of reports, and we'll just jump straight in there. He said, Massimo said, there's been a lot of rumors around a Chris Paul trade at the moment. This is to Harrison. Do you think this is realistic in terms of money to trade for him and money after the trade to fill up a roster?
I don't think it is realistic in the sense of like, I think they will look into it. Like I absolutely buy into that because like, look, like, you know, the thing that I keep coming back to is I went back and I looked at an interview that LeBron did right after the Thunder got eliminated. And he was talking about like, still the season, like just appreciating what Chris Paul did and talking about how much credit he should get for it. And when he was talking about what had happened to Chris Paul last summer, he said they traded him to he was talking, you know, in the voice of, you know, critics or something like that. It's like, oh, they traded him to the slums. Like if LeBron is calling Oklahoma City the slums of the NBA and like the guy that he was the best man for in his wedding and the godfather to Bronny is playing there, do you think that's a place that LeBron wants, you know, that guy to finish out his career? And, you know, or do you think LeBron wants to try and get him a chance at a ring? Like, I think it's definitely the latter. That said, Chris Paul is making, I believe, 41 million next year, last I checked. And then like 40 million the following year. And well, that I don't think is as bad of a contract as people are saying it is, with only 2 years left on it, especially when the Lakers are capped out either way. I actually do think that there's some logic in trying to trade for that. That said, it's just so much money. It's hard to construct a trade that works, that could not be taken apart by Avery Bradley saying, I don't want to play in Oklahoma City and opting out, or JaVale McGee saying, I don't want to go to the Thunder and opting out, or like, you know, you're relying on KCP to say, I want to go to the Thunder, and then the Thunder saying, okay, I want $18 million of KCP. You know, like there's just so many variables there that it's really hard financially to make it work. And that's why I don't ultimately think it would happen. I do think that there is a logic to it, because like, why not double down, see if you can raise your ceiling as a team? I do think that it lowers the floor because you lose out on some of the depth, some of the wing defenders. I get why some people don't want to do it, but I think that he, even though he's a little older, he was second team All NBA last year. He fits perfectly with LeBron and Anthony Davis as like a souped up version of what the Lakers hoped Rondo would give them last year. And I think it's worth exploring. And I think that I would actually do it. I just don't think that it's actually realistic to get done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see someone asking, what if he negotiates a buyout? I cannot see Oklahoma City paying CP3 almost $90 million to leave.
No way.
Like that's just in a pandemic, in a small market, that's just not realistic to me. Unless CP3 is just like, give me, you know, $5 million and let me leave. Like, but I also don't see CP3, a guy who basically became president of the Players Association, to argue for being allowed to sign the contract he is currently on. Like, you know, I just don't see him like giving up all of that money for the precedent that it would set.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. I like the thought of Chris Paul on the team. I like the thought of, obviously, Rondo was fantastic through the playoffs, but he didn't give us it in the regular season. There was a lot of doubt over him in the regular season. So, you know, Chris Paul's like a playoff Rondo throughout the entire season, really. And not to mention the amount of workload that he would take off AD and LeBron throughout the regular season as well.
It allows all of them to like load manage on the court to a degree, because none of them are having to do as much as they were being asked to do previously. And like, can you imagine like, you know, like those minutes when LeBron goes to the bench, and like, remember early on in the season, it was like, oh man, like here's these AD only minutes where like, you know, they're just going to try and make something work. There were points where AD was having to get the ball at half court and like initiate sets. Like imagine putting Chris Paul in there all of a sudden, like, you know, like I just don't know that there are very many minutes that the Lakers, at least offensively, would ever lose with that core. But at the same time, he is aging, even though he has a jumper, so he projects to age well. That is an expensive deal. You're basically also taking yourself out of the Giannis sweepstakes because like it extends into next year. Like, you know, there is definitely risk with doing something like that. I'm just of the mind that like, look, there's a lot of uncertainty around these other contenders. Double down, go for it with this core. We've already seen how good just LeBron and AD can be. Try and get that, and then figure out the wing defense rotation, whatever. But I also understand that you're creating some new weaknesses for this roster if you do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think you pretty much covered everything there. I do agree with you.
I've been reading a lot about this. I got to be ready, you know, like.
Yeah, I had no doubt. That's why I knew it was going to be an entertaining question. And then this one as well. I'm looking forward to this one. I think Jonathan's going to fire this one away.
This is from Scott. Shout out to Scott, another Patreon member. And it's kind of piggybacking off the last question on the topics of trades. Who would you like to see us try and trade for? Have you got any names on your wish list that you would love to see in the Laker uniform?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Bradley Beal's at the top of the list. I don't think that, again, this is another one that I don't think is realistic. Like, I just don't see what the Lakers have that Washington's like, yeah, let's just like salary dump him or something. Like they just signed him to an extension or re-signed him in free agency. I forget if that was an extension or restricted free, you know, whatever it was, but they just signed him on a long-term deal. He's their best player. Like, unless you're also taking John Wall back, which at that point, it's just unfeasible from a contract perspective. Like, I just can't see that deal happening, but he would be the perfect third star for the Lakers and like this team if they could make it happen. Outside of that, like I just don't, or outside of the CP3 scenario where you want to look into it for obvious reasons, like I just don't really see like a trade or like a guy that's available that's obvious right now where I'm like, let's bring that guy in when like this team just won the title. Like, why are we in a rush to move on from these guys? You know what I mean? Like, I understand that there's some, I think like, you know, worry over the future of Danny Green and, you know, like what's going on with him. Is he going to be able to bring it more next year and get healthy? Like there's, Kuz is going to be a restricted free agent. Do you want to try and use him as an asset before you potentially, obviously they wouldn't lose him for nothing. They could match anything in restricted free agency. But like, if they sign Giannis, just like theoretically or something, or sign a big free agent the next summer, are they going to keep him or would they lose him for nothing? You know what I mean? So like, I think like there's reasons to look at trades and things like that. I'm just not seeing anyone on the market right now, at least on the trade market, like free agency is a different story, but trade market where I'm like, yeah, let's give up assets for this guy. Like, why do the Lakers want to trade for Derrick Rose? Like, what does he fix for them? You know what I mean? Like a huge high usage guy, one-dimensional volume scorer. Like, I just don't see how he helps this team in any meaningful way and doesn't create, look, people are going to be mad about this, but I said it on our podcast last night. Like, Kyle Kuzma is a more valuable playoffs player than Derrick Rose. Like, he just is, in my opinion, because he can defend. He's long. Like, he can find ways to make an impact without the ball. Like, he's not as big of a star. He's not as big of a name, but I'd rather have him in a playoff series, on this team, especially.
I think it depends what like Derrick Rose you get, really. Obviously, there's the risk of injury that kind of worries me, and then not to mention that if the price is quite high to get him, we could be fleeced trying to get him. I mean, I know it's like
Anthony asked me last night.
Really.
Anthony, I'm with you. Like Anthony asked me last night when we were talking about this, what's the most you'd give up? Like maybe Quinn Cook and like a conditional like second rounder or something like that. Other than that, like I'm not giving up anything for Derrick Rose. Like I saw Pistons fans saying Kyle Kuzma wasn't enough. It's like, okay, well then, I mean, if the Pistons feel that way, then you hang up the phone. Like if they try to get Alex Caruso again, like the Lakers were reportedly offering at the deadline, it came out, like I'd laugh and hang up. Like like Alex Caruso is a more valuable playoff player than Derrick Rose. He just is. Like it's, Mike Trudell got a lot of hate online for his Caruso's better than Lou Williams take. And like, I think that people missed a lot of the nuance in that. Like Alex Caruso, as we saw in the playoffs this year, is a more playable playoffs player than Lou Williams is. He just is, and like people look at the scoring numbers and all this stuff. Like you have to be able to play on both ends in the playoffs, and you have to be able to, especially on this team, the best defense in the NBA, the most versatile defense in the NBA. You have to be able to fulfill roles on that end. Derrick Rose can't do that. Like he can't close games. Why are we signing this guy?
Yeah,
or trading or giving up anything for him.
Yeah, no. The most I think I could see, like if I was in their position, like the most I'd give is JaVale and Quinn Cook.
Yeah,
like that's the only two players I could consider. Be like, you have them. He's on last year of his contract. Maybe he fits into a team dynamic, and if he realizes he's on in a championship roster, maybe he kind of says, okay, I'll be the secondary playmaker. I'll be that punch. That's that kind of third scoring option, potentially off the bench when LeBron's resting or AD is resting. But yeah, it's a quite a difficult sell on Derrick Rose because I'm fairly certain that the Pistons and the Lakers have very, very different valuations of Derrick Rose. Whereas the Lakers are more than likely like what they have, and obviously the Detroit Pistons they're in a rebuild of sorts. Like they definitely are in a rebuild. But
they have a new GM, though, which is the only reason I think it might change from the trade deadline. Like maybe going into the final year of a deal, it's not mid-season anymore. Like maybe they value him less and just want to get something. But I also I just don't see it. Like I think they're going to be too high on him. I'm with you.
There's two players that I would consider going for, but again, I'm not certain we have the assets, and I think it'd be too costly. Like everyone's talking about Victor Oladipo at this moment in time, that he could be like a potentially like a really good fit with the Lakers, a good third scorer. A potential. He's a great defender. He's a good. He's not an exceptional 3-point shooter, but he's a very kind of passable 3-point shooter. Yeah, him and Drew Holiday are two players I'd love the Lakers to go for. Drew, I think, is a lot more unrealistic.
Drew, I really like. Yeah,
I think he'd be the exceptional third star alongside LeBron and AD. He just obviously he knows how to play with AD, having played with him for many years in New Orleans. But I think his 3-point shooting, his defense, is just his ability to do all the kind of the nitty gritty would be perfect on this Lakers team. But I can't see David Griffin kind of.
Yeah, me either.
I can't see him talking. No, I can't see
Can
him
you
talking
imagine? Like,
again.
he's not going to help deliver the Lakers a second championship after. Like, their ownership group they were so petty about the AD trade. There's no way they're going to allow that. But God, would I love to see the Pelicans fan meltdown if Drew Holiday like got traded to the Lakers for like, I don't know, like Kuzma and like Quinn Cook's contract or something. You know, like I forget how much he's making, so it would take more than that. But like, if Pelicans bloggers and fans would lose it if the Pelicans gave up Drew Holiday to this team, and God, I want to see it. But yeah, I agree with you that he would be great. Oladipo worries me a little bit more just because he didn't look great in the bubble, and like coming off of I forget, was it ACL, Achilles? Like, what did he have? It was a knee injury, right? Like, and
torn ligaments in his knee.
Yeah, I'm just a little worried about like, you know, the health there and stuff like that. So I'd be a little concerned about giving up a bunch of wing defenders for a guy that may not be able to stay on the floor just from a health perspective. But like, if healthy, like, I agree, he's a great fit.
Yeah, I think with a lot of names that we just mentioned, then obviously Beal being, I think, completely out of there, and then obviously we've got Drew Holiday and who was the last name we said? Oladipo. I think with the Lakers not holding too many assets, I'm just a little bit worried that kind of like...
Yeah, it's just tough to make a trade right now.
Well, they bait the Lakers into an offer. The Lakers put their best offer on the table, which isn't too much. And then all these other teams come swooping in and just... Yeah,
that too.
Better in the offer straight away.
No, look, all the leaks you're hearing right now is agents and opposing GMs trying to like basically get the market up for their guys and get other teams to be like, oh, we can't let that guy go to the Lakers. We better give a first round pick for Derrick Rose or, you know, whatever it may be. Like all of it's just leverage, leaks, gaslighting season, basically. So like all this stuff that you just got to remember when you're hearing this stuff, like, it's coming out for a reason. There's someone that wants that information out there. And that doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means why are they telling a reporter this? You know what I mean? And in the cases of this stuff, it's because they want to bait the Lakers into driving up their offer, and they want to get other teams to be like, oh, the Lakers are offering that exactly like you said, and just come in and outbid them. So like, we got to remember all this stuff is coming out for a reason. And it's not because it's not necessarily because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, and Drew's making $26 million, it looks like, from our friend Lake Show Scoop in the comments. So, like, yeah, I mean, that's like, you know, that's not as tough as the CP3 trade, but I just can't see New Orleans giving up on him, and like, especially that ownership group. They were so mad about the AD clutch stuff. Like, I don't foresee Lakers Pelicans deals for a while, and they have no incentive to make the Lakers better with getting their draft picks the next couple of years.
I have a terrible trade scenario that everyone hates, and then I know Matt despises. I think he knows him.
I love terrible trade scenarios. I'm ready.
I get these on a daily basis from Jonathan. I'll just be in the middle of the day, kind of like just you know, doing whatever I do, just, you know, living life, and then, oh, Matt, I've got a trade scenario for you, and I'm like,
that's Christian in our Slack. Christian is our nihilistic trades guy. He's like, oh, here's how they're going to trade for DeMar DeRozan. I'm like, why do you have to do this today?
This one's bad.
Throw it at me. I'm ready.
This one's bad. Russell Westbrook. I'm just convinced. I'm convinced that there is a scenario in which it works really, really well. Because one, I can understand that with a new general manager coming into Houston, a new coach coming into Houston, they're going to want to put their own stamp on things in Houston and kind of. And obviously, it's been proven that, especially in the playoffs, they don't work. Like, a lot of people have kind of been giving them credit, saying, "Oh, they played better together during the regular season than expected." But the problem reared its ugly head in the playoffs.
Playoffs is a different game.
Massively different. Obviously, there's questions. That's put it nicely. There's questions about the ownership in Houston that they aren't particularly pleased about spending that much money and still being a second round team, and just the friendship between LeBron and Russell Westbrook seems to be quite strong at this moment in time. And the only reason why I think it could happen, I'm saying it like a 10% chance it could happen, 90% chance it's bad, but I can see them letting him go for pretty much next to nothing. Like, I can see, like, say for example, I don't know if the money works, but say Danny Green sign and trade for KCP, throw like Avery Bradley's contract in there. Like it's similar enough to in contract wise to Chris
that
Paul.
I think gets you there. I think it does.
It gets you, like a sign and trade. If KCP like earned like 13-14 million over 3 years via sign and trade, that could potentially get done. Without giving up,
KCP's been linked to Houston before. He was linked to Houston at the last trade deadline. Not this year, but the prior year when there was some like Clutch was definitely considering like wanting to get him out of there and get him somewhere where he'd get paid. But they didn't want to do it just somewhere where like, he wouldn't be able to audition. Was like definitely a thing there.
Yeah. You've been a lot nicer about this trade than Matt has, so thank you for that.
First of all, I respect the boldness of it, of just I love it when people throw like these insane like just stuff at the wall, like maybe this could happen, here's how it would work. Like I love it. So like I appreciate you like actually putting the thought into it and why it would happen. I think to add to your point, like the other thing you mentioned, the ownership group being kind of iffy, like Tillman Fertitta may not actually be like as rich as like there's been whispers that he's not kind of in some trouble financially. Like literally all of the businesses that he owns have been impacted, like casinos, restaurants, like chain restaurants, especially like all of this stuff is getting massively impacted by the pandemic to the point that he was basically begging President Trump for money. And so like, I think like, them selling Russ for very little, like other than salary cap relief, is not totally off the table. That said, I don't like love the fit with him and LeBron just because like it's not like Rondo where randomly he went up a level and was 40% almost like 3-point shooter in the playoffs, and he has steadily improved over the last couple of years at that, especially when he's a willing shooter. Russ is a horrible shooter, and I don't think that you have enough space there to make that work, and he's not a good defender either to where like I want to give all that money for him. Like Chris Paul, at least he fits perfectly as a shooter, and he's like, I mean, he's a better player than Russ. I'm still confused as to why that trade really happened other than the personnel dynamics between him and Harden. Like he fits better with LeBron, and like he is, even though he's small, he is a better defender than Russ is, both from a team perspective and individual. So like I don't like love the fit. It is something where I could see, because of the personal factors that you mentioned, LeBron has always liked and respected Russ's game. And I could see them like looking into it if the price is low enough, but I just don't love it from like a fit perspective for this team, really.
I like it in kind of if Russ was, again, like, this is all about accepting roles, which being a former MVP, you can't expect him to be kind of
tough.
It'd be very, very tough. But if he can be the third guy, like if it's him and AD on the floor, they run the pick and roll effectively. If he's on the floor with LeBron and AD, maybe he can slash to the rim or lead the fast break, so LeBron isn't constantly having the ball in his hands or being challenged or kind of wearing himself down. But yeah, it's the shooting is the killer. If his shooting was acceptable, it'd be a slam dunk.
I love the fit with just AD, or even to some degree with just LeBron. It's just with both, I think it's tough to make the geometry of it work, and especially it also takes away from your defense during those minutes. And like, how many minutes do you really want to play without both LeBron and AD on the floor? Like, you want to maximize their time together, and Russ doesn't necessarily help you do that. Like, I think that if the Lakers are looking at trades, it's not going to be the kind of guys that have been coming up yet. Like, it's going to be another wing defender, another guy that can come in and accentuate a strength that the Lakers already have, or someone who's like a ball handler that can shoot a little bit. Like I see, like in the comments, they're asking about Darren Collison. He is a guy that I could see the Lakers revisiting, although the way that he kind of rejected them, I would imagine there's probably like some distaste for how all of that went down, and then like trying to pretend like he wasn't actually considering a comeback. And I don't know if you saw the podcast that he did with Chris Haynes' brother, earlier during the playoffs. He was like, yeah, I wasn't even trying to come back. Like I was just going to a game because I like basketball. It's like, I don't know if the Lakers are going to appreciate the way that he kind of lied about that and led them on a little bit. So like, I don't know that I see it, although he would be an interesting fit from just like a basketball perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're pretty much going to wrap it up there. We're a little bit longer than we thought we were going to be, but
I'm good at talking a lot. So like I tend to do that with podcasts. That's why I told you not to worry about the time, because I knew if we went over, it would be my fault that I just like wouldn't stop talking. So I appreciate you guys having me on. No,
it's absolutely fine. We'll get out of here before Jonathan throws another trade scenario at us. Well, you know, Harrison, we really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast, and we appreciate you taking the time for just everything you've done for Lakers UK. To be honest with you, just, you know, you've always given us, you know, little pockets of your time here and there, whether it be direct message or coming on the podcast or whatever it may be, with myself and Jonathan as well. So really do appreciate it. Really do appreciate you coming on for a chat. It's been a pleasure as always.
No, I appreciate the appreciation is very much mutual. Like, you guys do great work, and like I just love that like the Lakers have built like a worldwide community. Like, this is the stuff that, you know, like I always talk to Pete about, like you know, on and offline. It's like the people are like this fan base is worldwide. Like, it's a huge community, and I love that. I love that there is a Lakers UK. Like, how many fan bases have like an entire podcast of or like an entire like website and like community that like built just by people from like another country? Like, there aren't very many NBA teams with that. And like I just love that like this whole thing is just so worldwide, and I appreciate all of your guys' support over the years, all of the support from fans just worldwide. So like I love doing this stuff, and I'm always happy to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And before we do get out of here, people should know by now you're an absolute must follow on social media. But before we head off, do you want to give your socials a shout, and or any work that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so you know, just silverscreenandroll.com is where you can find all of my work. I like that's you know, running that site is like my entire like basically life mission at this point. Like, it's become like such a huge thing. And like, you can find me on Twitter at HMFAIGEN. That's where I plug most of my work. So if you're, and you know, I like fire off jokes and tweets about people that, you know, you might have forgotten were a bucket. But like, yeah, I mean, those are the two main ones. As far as work coming up, like, we're doing our season review series right now on Silver Screen and Roll. So like, I wrote about DeMarcus Cousins and why I fully expect him to be back in a Lakers uniform next year. And I wrote about Quinn Cook for later this week. So we have that stuff coming. Christian wrote about what, you know, I don't know if either of you saw the kind of bananas Space Jam plot leak of like what the movie or plot synopsis of what it's going to be about. And Christian wrote up what WB properties he wants LeBron to jump through during that movie. So, you know, like we have your everything from Chris Paul and Derrick Rose trade talk to Space Jam coverage. And, you know, we just try to do it all and do it all thoughtfully. So I'm just grateful that I get to work with the people that I work with, and that anyone cares what I have to write or podcast about. So just check those places out.
Yeah, definitely is a must. The work over there is absolutely top notch. Right, I think we're out of here, Jonathan. Are you all good over there?
I'm all good. Thank you so much again, Harrison. It was a real pleasure.
Of course, guys, anytime.
Yeah, and we'll just round it out. We just want to say a huge thank you to the Patreon members, Amandeep, Fardi, both Jonathans, Benjamin, Massimo, Cole, Adam, Phil, and Steve. Your support is much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting us whilst unlocking the full Lakers UK community plus perks, visit www.patreon.com/LA Lakers UK. Right. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to tell some of your Laker friends about it. You can find the Late Late Show on all major podcast platforms. Please follow, like, share where possible, and leave a review. Follow Lakers UK over on Twitter and Instagram under LA Lakers UK. Check out our website, lakersuk.com. And we'll leave it there. We'll catch you next time, guys.